In a small countryside town, hidden behind fields of golden corn, two 22-year-old men find solace in each other's arms. Gabriel, the son of a wealthy businessman, and Matteo, a simple farm worker, live worlds apart but share a love that defies the odds. Every afternoon they escape to the cornfields to be together, their love hidden from prying eyes. But secrets can only stay buried for so long. Will their love survive the barriers of class and expectation? Stay with us to witness this heartwarming tale of love, courage, and perseverance. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that inspire and move you. Let's dive into this story of forbidden love blooming under the golden skies. The late afternoon sun bathed the endless rows of corn in a golden glow, creating a haven far removed from the expectations and judgment of the outside world. Gabriel stepped carefully between the tall stalks, his polished leather shoes sinking slightly into the soft soil. His heart raced, not from exertion, but from the anticipation of seeing Matteo. Gabriel, with his perfectly styled blonde hair and crisp white shirt, looked out of place in the rustic fields. Yet there was something about the freedom and rawness of this place that called to him, something that felt more like home than the marble halls of his family's estate. And at the center of it all was Matteo. Gabriel reached their usual spot, a small clearing where the corn gave way to a patch of wildflowers. Matteo was already there, sitting on the ground with his back resting against a sturdy oak tree. His dark hair fell messily over his forehead, and his simple, worn shirt clung to his lean frame, still damp from a hard day's work. As he looked up and met Gabriel's gaze, a smile broke across his face, a smile that made Gabriel's world stand still. "You're late," Matteo teased, his voice warm and playful. Gabriel rolled his eyes as he sat down beside him, their knees brushing. "Blame my father. Another lecture about the importance of family reputation." He mimicked the stern tone of his father, earning a soft laugh from Matteo. "Ah, the struggles of the rich and powerful," Matteo said, his tone light but his eyes filled with understanding. "And yet, here you are, in my world." Gabriel leaned closer, his hand brushing against Matteo's. "Your world is the only one that feels real to me." Matteo looked at him, his smile fading into something softer, more vulnerable. "And yet, it's a world you could leave behind at any moment." Gabriel frowned, his heart aching at the unspoken truth in Matteo's words. The differences between them were impossible to ignore. Gabriel's family owned the land Matteo worked on. Their lives couldn't have been more different, and yet, here in the golden fields, those differences seemed to melt away. "You know I'd never leave you," Gabriel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Matteo hesitated, searching Gabriel's eyes for sincerity. Finally he sighed and rested his head on Gabriel's shoulder. "Sometimes I wish we could stay here forever," he murmured. "Just you, me, and the fields." Gabriel wrapped an arm around him, pulling him closer. "One day," he promised. "One day, we'll have our own place. No hiding, no secrets. Just us." For a moment, the world felt perfect. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the fields as the two of them sat together, their breaths in sync. Gabriel reached for Matteo's hand, intertwining their fingers as if to anchor himself to this moment. But perfection is fleeting. As the sky turned a deep orange, the sound of an approaching car shattered their peace. Gabriel's heart leapt into his throat as he recognized the voice of his family's driver calling his name. Panic set in. "Gabriel!" The voice echoed through the fields, growing closer. "Your father sent me to find you." Matteo sat up straight, his expression tense. "You should go," he whispered, his voice tinged with both urgency and sadness. Gabriel hesitated, his grip on Mateo's hand tightening. I don't want to leave. You have to, Mateo insisted. We can't let them find us. Reluctantly, Gabriel stood, his heart breaking as he looked down at Mateo. Tomorrow? He asked, his voice heavy with emotion. Mateo nodded. Tomorrow. Gabriel leaned down, pressing a quick, desperate kiss to Mateo's lips before turning and running back toward the car. As he disappeared into the golden rows of corn, Mateo sat alone once again, the warmth of the moment fading with the setting sun. The car ride back to the estate was suffocating. Gabriel sat silently in the back seat, his mind replaying the fleeting kiss with Mateo, the warmth of his touch, and the fear in his eyes as the driver's voice cut through the cornfields. He could still feel the adrenaline coursing through him, his heart pounding as if it hadn't caught up with reality. When the car stopped in front of his family's grand estate, Gabriel hesitated before stepping out. The towering columns and sprawling gardens were meant to symbolize wealth and power, but to him, they felt like a cage. As he entered, he was immediately greeted by his father's sharp voice. Where were you, Gabriel? His father asked, standing in the doorway of his study. Dressed in a tailored suit, his father's piercing gaze bore into him, demanding an explanation. Gabriel took a deep breath, forcing himself to maintain a calm facade. I was out taking pictures for the portfolio I'm working on, he said, holding up the old film camera hanging around his neck. It was a partial truth. Photography had always been his excuse, but Mateo was his real escape. His father narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. I hope you weren't wasting time in those fields again. You're a miller. You have responsibilities, Gabriel. You can't afford to indulge in meaningless distractions. Gabriel clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. It's not meaningless to me, he muttered, his voice barely audible. What was that? His father snapped, stepping closer. Nothing, Gabriel said quickly, avoiding his father's gaze. I'll head to my room. Without waiting for a response, Gabriel turned and climbed the grand staircase, his legs heavy with the weight of his father's expectations. When he finally reached the solitude of his room, he collapsed onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. His chest ached, not from his father's words, but from the longing to be back in the cornfields with Mateo. Meanwhile, Mateo sat alone in the clearing, the golden light fading into dusk. The farm was quiet now, the workers having finished their day's labor. Mateo leaned back against the oak tree, his thoughts consumed by Gabriel. He traced the line of his lips with his fingers, still feeling the warmth of their kiss. He wanted to believe in Gabriel's promises, that one day they could have a life together without hiding. But doubt lingered, fueled by the glaring differences in their worlds. Mateo had grown up with nothing but his hands and hard work to rely on, while Gabriel's life was defined by privilege and wealth. Could love really bridge that gap? As the stars began to dot the sky, Mateo sighed and stood, brushing the dirt from his jeans. He had to prepare for another long day of work tomorrow, but in his heart, he held on to the hope that Gabriel would return. The next day came quickly, and as the afternoon sun began its descent, Gabriel found himself standing at the edge of the cornfields once again. This time, his heart felt heavier than usual. His father's words echoed in his mind, and for a moment, he wondered if he was being selfish. But as he stepped into the fields, all those doubts melted away. Mateo was waiting in their usual spot, his dark eyes lighting up the moment he saw Gabriel. I was starting to think you wouldn't come, he said, a teasing smile on his lips. I'll always come, Gabriel replied, his voice firm. No matter what. They sat together under the oak tree, their conversation light at first, but the weight of unspoken fears lingered in the air. Gabriel finally broke the silence. Mateo, what if we didn't have to hide? What if we left this place? Together? Mateo's expression softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes. And where would we go, Gabriel? Your world isn't ready for us. My world won't let us stay. Then we'll make our own world, Gabriel said, his voice trembling with emotion. I don't care about the money, the expectations, any of it. I just want you. Mateo reached out, his hand brushing against Gabriel's cheek. I want that too, he whispered. But dreams don't always survive reality. The shadows parted, revealing an older man with a weathered face and piercing eyes. Mateo's heart sank as he recognized Mr. Vargas, the overseer of the farm. The man stopped a few feet away, his gaze flicking between Gabriel and Mateo with a look of thinly veiled disdain. What's this, Mateo? Vargas asked, his voice low but sharp, like a whip. Slacking off in the middle of the day? And with company, no less? Mateo rose to his feet quickly, his body tense. I was just taking a break, he said, his voice steady despite the fear tightening in his chest. Vargas sneered. And the rich boy? What's he doing here? Slumming it for a thrill? Gabriel stepped forward, his chin held high. I'm here because I want to be, he said firmly. Whatever you think you saw, it's none of your business. Vargas let out a low, bitter laugh. Oh, it's my business, all right. You think people won't notice? A Miller boy sneaking around with a farmhand? Do you have any idea what your family would say about this? Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he didn't back down. My family has nothing to do with this. Vargas took a step closer, his expression darkening. You'd better hope they don't find out. This isn't just about you, boy. If word gets out, Mateo won't just lose his job. He'll lose his reputation, his place in this town. Mateo's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he said nothing. The weight of Vargas's words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the warmth of the golden fields. Gabriel looked at Mateo, his heart breaking at the anguish in his eyes. You're wrong, Gabriel said finally, his voice trembling with emotion. What we have, it's real. And no one, not you or my family, can take that away from us. Vargas shook his head, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. You're a fool, both of you. Love doesn't survive reality, not in a place like this. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the clearing, the distant rustle of corn stalks the only sound. Gabriel turned to Mateo, his eyes pleading. I'm not going to let him scare us. We'll figure this out. Together. Mateo looked away, his shoulders slumping. Maybe he's right, he said quietly. Maybe this isn't meant to last. Gabriel reached out, gently tilting Mateo's face toward his. Don't say that, he whispered. We've come this far. I'm not giving up on us now. The sound of the engine grew louder, the crunch of tires on gravel sending shivers down Gabriel's spine. Mateo froze, his dark eyes wide with panic as he gripped Gabriel's arm. It's your father, isn't it? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel didn't need to answer. The sleek black car came into view, pulling to a sharp stop at the edge of the fields. The door swung open, and out stepped Mr. Miller, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that looked out of place against the rustic backdrop of the cornfields. His piercing gaze locked onto Gabriel and Mateo, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. Gabriel! His voice thundered, cutting through the stillness. What is the meaning of this? Gabriel stepped forward, placing himself protectively in front of Mateo. Father, this is none of your business, he said firmly, though his voice wavered under the weight of the confrontation. Mr. Miller's eyes narrowed. None of my business. You're my son, Gabriel. Everything you do reflects on this family. And now I find you Here. He spat the word as if it were poison. With a farmhand? Do you have any idea what this could do to our reputation? Matteo lowered his gaze, shame burning in his chest. But Gabriel stood tall, his fists clenched at his sides. I don't care about your reputation, he said, his voice rising. I care about him. Matteo means more to me than all of this. Your money, your expectations, your empty legacy. Mr. Miller's face turned red with anger. You're throwing your life away for this? A fleeting infatuation with someone beneath your station? Matteo flinched at the words, but Gabriel didn't back down. He's not beneath me, Gabriel said, his voice steady. He's the only person who's ever made me feel alive, and I won't let you take that away from me. For a moment the tension was unbearable. Mr. Miller's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with fury. If you walk away with him, don't bother coming back, he said coldly. You'll lose everything. Your inheritance, your future, your family. Gabriel hesitated, the weight of his father's ultimatum pressing down on him. He glanced back at Matteo, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and hope. Matteo shook his head slightly, his eyes pleading. Gabriel, don't, he whispered. It's not worth it. But Gabriel turned back to his father, his decision clear in his eyes. I've already made my choice, he said, and it's not the life you've planned for me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cornfields. Gabriel and Matteo stood in silence, the enormity of what had just happened sinking in. Gabriel had chosen love over everything else, his family, his inheritance, and the life he had always known. Now it was just the two of them against the world. We should leave, Matteo said softly, breaking the silence. If your father really meant what he said, he won't stop here. Gabriel nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't care where we go, as long as we're together. That night, they packed what little they had. Matteo gathered his few belongings, a worn leather bag, some clothes, and a small notebook filled with sketches and dreams. Gabriel brought his vintage camera, a few clothes, and the little cash he had stashed away. The plan was simple. Leave the small town and head somewhere no one knew them, somewhere they could start fresh. By dawn, they were on a bus headed to the city. The ride was long and quiet, the hum of the engine and the occasional chatter of passengers filling the space. Gabriel rested his head on Matteo's shoulder, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. Matteo held him close, his heart heavy but hopeful. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had something to fight for. When they arrived in the city, it was overwhelming. The towering buildings and bustling streets were a far cry from the quiet cornfields they had left behind. But they found a small apartment on the edge of town, a modest one-room space with creaky floors and a leaky faucet. It wasn't much, but to them it was a sanctuary. Over the weeks that followed, they began to build a life together. Matteo found work at a local cafe, his friendly demeanor quickly earning him the trust of the customers. Gabriel started selling his photographs to small galleries, his work capturing the raw beauty of their journey. They worked hard, but they were happy. Every evening they would sit together on their tiny balcony, watching the city lights and dreaming of the future. One evening, as they shared a simple meal, Gabriel reached for Matteo's hand. I know it hasn't been easy, he said, his voice filled with emotion. But I've never regretted choosing this. Choosing you. Matteo smiled, his dark eyes shining. Neither have I. You've given me a life I never thought I could have. Gabriel stood frozen in the doorway, his heart racing. The man before him was unmistakable. Mr. Miller, his father, looking out of place in his tailored suit against the worn frame of their modest apartment door. His father's face was stern, but his usual expression of arrogance was replaced by something Gabriel couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Or maybe guilt? "May I come in?" Mr. Miller asked, his voice quieter than Gabriel had ever heard it. Mateo appeared at Gabriel's side, his body tense, ready to protect what they had built. Gabriel hesitated but finally stepped aside, allowing his father to enter. The small apartment seemed to magnify the tension as Mr. Miller looked around, his sharp eyes taking in the space. "Why are you here?" Gabriel asked, his tone guarded. "I thought you made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore." Mr. Miller sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. It was the first time Gabriel had ever seen him look vulnerable. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice heavy. "I was wrong." Gabriel blinked, caught off guard by the admission. "Wrong about what?" "About you. About this." Mr. Miller gestured to the apartment, then to Mateo. "I let my pride and expectations blind me to what really matters. I thought I was protecting our family's legacy, but I see now that I was only hurting you." Mateo's dark eyes narrowed as he stepped forward. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice steady. "Do you see me now, or am I still just the farmhand you dismissed?" Mr. Miller turned to Mateo, his gaze softening. "I see you, Mateo. I see how much you mean to my son. And I see how wrong I was to think your love was anything less than real." Gabriel felt his throat tighten, the weight of years of tension with his father pressing against him. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come here after everything?" Mr. Miller's expression faltered. "Because I realized what I stood to lose. You're my son, Gabriel. I don't want to lose you. And if Mateo is the person who makes you happy, then I want to support that." For a long moment, the room was silent. Gabriel searched his father's face, looking for any trace of insincerity, but all he saw was genuine remorse. Finally, he nodded, his emotions threatening to spill over. "It's going to take time," he said, "but thank you." Mr. Miller nodded, understanding the unspoken forgiveness. "I don't expect this to fix everything overnight, but I want to try." As the tension in the room eased, Mateo reached for Gabriel's hand, intertwining their fingers. "This doesn't change what we've built," Mateo said softly, "but it does mean a lot." Mr. Miller gave a small smile. "It's a start." That evening, as the city lights twinkled outside their apartment window, Gabriel and Mateo sat together, the weight of the past slowly lifting. For the first time in months, they felt a sense of peace, knowing that their love had not only survived but grown stronger in the face of every obstacle. Sitting on their small balcony, Gabriel looked at Mateo, his heart full. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mateo leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to Gabriel's temple. "No," he said with a smile. "We're just getting started." Love is powerful. It bridges gaps, breaks barriers, and teaches us what truly matters. What would you do for love? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that inspire and move you. Thank you for watching.